Let's express our appreciation for Michael Kyle, who is in SAF FM, for his wonderful singing. Thank you. Our appreciation for the Armed Forces Color Guard, which is led by Sergeant Eric Holland, so our thanks to them. And of course to Admiral Crenshaw for that moving invocation. He is our program chair today and has been critical in helping pull this all together. Thank you, Admiral Crenshaw. Okay, again, good morning. I'm Deborah Delmar, managing partner with Vanguard Advisors, and I have the great honor to be your chair for the event this year. On behalf of our Washington chapter president, Ariane Whittemore, where's Ariane? There she is there. And in fact, the entire chapter and our committee, we want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time out of very busy schedules to be here. Frankly, I've been saying a novena for 2 weeks on the weather. This has been pretty stressful this year, but thank God we weathered it out and we are here. So I hope it is a terrific day of training and networking for everyone here. It is a respite day, hopefully, from I know what is just extremely tough times, lots and lots of moving parts and things going on for everyone in our community, in our nation, in our world. So hopefully we will walk away from here feeling renewed and revigorated on the mission at hand. I want to go ahead and take a moment to recognize our distinguished guests. The Honorable Michael McCord, Undersecretary of Defense for Financial Management and Comptroller. The Honorable Robert Speer, who is the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Financial Management Comptroller. Dr. Gregory Treverton, who is the Chair of the National Intelligence Council, Office of the DNI. Honorable Gwen Sykes, who is the CFO of the U.S. Secret Service. Mr. Charlie Cook, who's the Principal Deputy Comptroller for Navy. Mr. Doug Bennett, who is the Principal Deputy Comptroller for the Air Force. Mr. Al Reynolds, who is our Executive Director of ASMC National. And obviously, we have numerous flags and senior executive service officials. We have our speakers, and of course, you all as our honored guests. Your support makes this event possible, and we are most grateful for that. Let me take one moment and just mention a couple of quick administrative tasks before I get into the business of the meeting here. There is no press that has been invited to this event, and so all remarks and comments are non-attribution. I would ask folks to please turn off their phones or make sure they're on silent. We appreciate everyone's cooperation with the guidance and the instructions that we've asked folks to comply with on the emails that have been sent. This is the largest crowd we've ever had in trying to absorb 25% more people here. We've changed our footprint and our venue, and we are still learning our way here. So we would ask for your indulgence if there are some lines or things along those lines. We are trying to work this the best we can, but we really appreciate everyone's understanding in that regard. Okay. I'm going to talk for 1 second about the 2015 theme that we selected today. Real change will transform the DoD-FM. Now, I'm sure each of you, if I would say, what does real change mean to you? You'd have a unique and different interpretation of what that means. But what is clear is that the DoD business support, that is the business side of the DoD, is at a critical inflection point. We really need to think about how we shift our trajectory in terms of both spend and effort and outcomes, because we're on short final now for audit. I'm sure you all are aware of that. We have been spending many, many years in our transformative efforts to move to modern technologies, to fully embrace ERPs, things along those lines. And the outcomes that we seek, the faster those occur, the better we will be able to support the warfighter and the mission. And each one of us, the whole triumvirate of military and civilians and contractors, are bound by honor to serve those who serve and do it as efficiently and as faithfully as we can. So this year's theme is meant to sort of acknowledge the vital role of each of you as professionals that you play, and it challenges us to push ourselves kind of out of our comfort zone and to move out of the status quo and to embrace the things that we need to really be able to support our mission in the 21st century. Okay. I would like to take one moment and, with gratitude, mention our generous sponsors who, without them, this event would not take place. And they continue to step up financially to enable our event. So I would ask, as you mingle today, that you would please take the time to go out to the exhibits, or where you see someone wearing a corporate badge, please interact with them and chat. I would ask you to hold your applause till the end, but I do want to mention the key sponsors that are here. So at the platinum level, we have both Grant Thornton and PwC. At the diamond level, we have 5 sponsors: Caliber, Carney & Company, E&Y, Oracle, and SAP. Our gold sponsors today, there are 4 of them: CACI, Deloitte, KPMG, and Savantage Solutions. We have 2 companies at the emerald sponsorship level: Definitive Logic and Vanguard Advisors. We have 3 sapphire sponsors: Accenture, St. Michael's, and Thomas Gray Incorporated. We have 10 at the silver level: Acuity, Citi, Cotton & Company, DCUC, Infor, H.J. Steininger, KGS, Management Concepts, Milcor, and Morgan Franklin. And finally, we have 10 at the bronze level: Becker, Business Info Strategies, CGI, IBM, AOC Solutions, LMI, Lynch Consulting, Immersion Consulting, Watkins, and TerraThink. So let's please give them all a warm thank you from ASMC. Needless to say, we have a whole group of speakers who are here enabling our day. And we are most grateful for them, and you can see the list here, and it's also in your program. But to both our keynote speakers and our workshop presenters, our heartfelt thanks for, again, supporting our agenda today and our program. I also want to express a thank you to our 25-person PDI committee. We've been working very hard since April of 2014 when this started, and there's literally thousands of man-hours that have been dedicated in a volunteer mode to put this on. So, and trust me, the crew makes this really easy. So, again, if you see folks out here, please thank them for their great efforts. We also have a group of 35-plus volunteers who are helping to orchestrate and make the day move smoothly, and we want to express our thanks to them. And we have a robust number of exhibitors out in the atrium where the food is. at least for the breaks in the morning. So please take a moment to interact with them and to engage. Lots of great stuff to show there. Okay, now I want to take a moment and mention that our charity that we have selected for our event this year is very near and dear to many of our hearts. It's Pets for Vets. And we usually select a charity each year, and this one was a real win-win because it not only focuses on our wounded warriors, but it aligns the need of those brave wounded warriors with our shelter animals, so man's best friend. So I'd like to provide a short video to give you a summary of that, and then I'll ask our honored guest to come up and receive our donation.
Thousands are wounded or disabled while serving our country. Some wounds can be invisible, but they are no less painful and make it difficult to transition back to civilian life.
When I first got back from Iraq, it was really hard. I was depressed and,
My vehicle took a hit from a rocket-propelled grenade, and it was directly on my side, and when I woke up, I was in the arms of my medic.
I have a very prominent PTSD injury from some actions that happened when I was active duty.
I was in an IED blast, and I got like 3 compression fractures in my vertebrae, tore 3 tendons, and post-concussion syndrome.
Living with PTSD and traumatic brain injury has made a huge impact in my life.
20% of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom soldiers return home suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. In addition, there are an alarming statistics of suicide and family abuse facing veterans returning to civilian life after military duty. Pets for Vets believes that companion animals can be the life-saving therapy or friend that many returning servicemen and women need. Over 5 million dogs and cats are euthanized every year in shelters across America. The Pets for Vets goal is to give back to those who have given everything for our country and to say thank you.
Oh my goodness!
Pets for Vets uses the power of unconditional love and companionship that dogs offer to rebuild the lives of U.S. servicemen and women. Shelter dogs that need attention and love and are facing certain death are specifically selected for each veteran to match his or her personality. They are then taught good manners using positive reinforcement to fit into the veteran's lifestyle. Each dog is healthy, up to date on vaccinations, and comes with all of the equipment needed to start a new life with a veteran. Together, the soldier and his or her Pets for Vets dog take their first steps on the way to recovery and integration back into society. Medical studies have shown that companion animals significantly improve mental and physical health, including reducing stress, depression, and anxiety. I have seen firsthand the positive impact Pets for Vets dogs have had on veterans.
This is probably one of the greatest days I've had in a long, long, long time.
Dogs are great. They give a lot. They give a lot of emotional support. They love you unconditionally. My therapy dog is going to change my life completely.
Having a dog right now, it's just to feel that warmth, that it will be unconditional. Like, no, doesn't matter if I'm not even brush my hair or looking pretty or whatever, that little creature will always love me.
The veterans and their dogs become constant companions and now have comfort and security.
I'd like to ask Mrs. Lee Overall, who's the director for the DC chapter of Pets for Vets, to come up and accept our contribution. I'll hand this off to you, just to show you. This isn't the real check.
Good morning. We have several other videos. I think we were trying to keep the tear factor down this morning. This is completely amazing. The American Society of Military Comptrollers, Deb and Robert, this donation will really help us enrich the lives of so many veterans. I guess I didn't keep my tear factor down. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, it's now my distinct honor to introduce our opening keynote speaker, the Honorable Michael McCord, Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. Mr. McCord assumed these duties in June of 2014. He serves as the principal advisor to the Secretary of Defense on all budgetary and financial management matters, including the development and execution of an over $500 billion annual budget. Mr. McCord is a long-standing public servant, having served as a congressional staff member for many years, and we'd like to go ahead and give him a very warm welcome, please.
Good morning. I'm going to have to speak my booking age. I'm never going to follow a tearjerker video like that. Wow. Also trying to figure out where to put my water here on this slopey thing here. Thank you. It's good to be speaking with all of you today. I do fondly remember the other room across the hall, that really nice auditorium. But good morning, fellow ASMC members. It's great to be here. Again, I've previously done this as the deputy, and I'm grateful, speaking of that, to my predecessor, Bob Hale, for his leadership over the 5+ years that he and I worked together. One of the things that I'm grateful for in particular is that I don't need to grab the wheel and start steering things in the department in a new direction. We were going in a good direction already, so I need to keep it going. That's my responsibility to pick up the pace in some case, to avoid the potholes that appear with some regularity in our daily lives. I'm also grateful to recently departed Secretary Chuck Hagel for giving me the opportunity to be the leader of my organization and of this career field as the comptroller. It's an opportunity that I very much wanted to have, and I'm grateful to have. Just the other day, I was speaking to a group about like this, only it was like 20 people. I was able to guest lecture a class with a friend of mine, Gordon Adams, who some of you may know, a professor over at American University, to some grad students on national security budgeting. And he sent me his syllabus so I would see where my part of my session, guest section, fit in the whole class. And so I read through the syllabus, and at the start of it was his thesis for the whole class to his students, which is no money, comma, no policy. And I could really get with that. I mean, you can't really say it much quicker than that, other than maybe one of my favorite Randy Newman songs, It's Money That Matters, if any of you know that one. That's why we love what we do, because we make things happen. So I want to talk a little bit about today what we are trying to do, what we're going to do with the resources that we get. Today is an auspicious day in a way. Later this afternoon, I will join my new boss, Ash Carter, in his first testimony as Secretary of Defense. So I want to talk about some of his priorities that he's going to bring to the department. Then I want to say a few words about our budget for FY16, what it is that we're trying to accomplish there, a budget that he inherited but will be supporting. We've been drilling him on that. And then finally, what is our role? What is our role as the FM community? What's my agenda in that respect? So Secretary Carter rejoins us. He was here for 5 years, gone for about 1, and back now. At a very challenging time. The degree of turbulence in this world is almost bewildering at times. You look at your paper every day, and I think it's magnified by the 24/7 news cycle and the instant communication that we have now. Every good thing, especially every bad thing, small or large, that happens, you hear about, you start trying to process in your mind. We are, as we have been throughout our entire lives as the United States, engaged and leading around the world. And I don't think that's going to change. But the missions that we're doing, many of which we wouldn't have predicted a year ago, we did not predict a year ago when we submitted a budget about a year ago this time. The rise of ISIL in Iraq and Syria, the Ebola mission that we've sent on, it's already come and gone within the space of a year pretty much. Unprecedented new things, trying to train and equip not just the forces of governments, which that was considered new 10 years ago, the so-called 1206 program to train and equip foreign militaries to the degree that we've been doing. Now to try and train and equip an opposition force that isn't even part of a government in Syria, in one of the most messy situations you can imagine. Again, just a very dynamic world. Across both the Central Command and the Africa Command regions, we see a radical Islamist threat spreading and franchising. So anybody who thought that was back in the box, clearly I think needs to be reconsidering. This is looking like a problem that's going to be with us for many years to come. But one of the things that Secretary Hagel used to say in particular, not the only person who said this, but it always struck me that this was part of his mindset, is to not just look around the world and see problem, 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 problem. And I think that is something we can be prone to in DoD because we are trying to reduce risk, eliminate risk, address risk, respond. And so we're always looking for the next problem, and that's good. But there are opportunities out there as well. Not everything is going poorly. If you look around, we are strengthening our relationships around the world. We are working more closely with the French, say, than at any time, in my lifetime prior to the last couple of years since World War II, I think. We have new relationship with the Australians, with the Philippines. India is starting to emerge as a major player in the world, and our leadership is very focused on that relationship. That was one of the things Secretary Carter focused on a lot when he was the deputy. So it is a messy world, and I think that people are struggling in this globalized world to make sense of it for themselves and find a place. And we see the forces that are tearing people apart struggling with forces that can bring us together. Clearly, globalization is not going to be some panacea that just brings us all together in one big, happy, connected world, connected economy. And we're going to struggle with that for some time. So Ash comes in as secretary at a time of a lot of turbulence. And he's going to state today some commitments that he's going to make to our troops and to both the future and the present of our department. As he looks around, he's going to talk about today 3 challenges that he sees where he thinks that we need to compete. We, the Department of Defense, need to compete in the space that we occupy. First is sort of the technology sphere, technology and operational concepts. Of course, what we buy, everybody knows that the private sector now moves faster, has for some time moved faster than we do. So there's a technological edge that we have to keep, both with respect to just what the private sector offers. Do we have the latest? Do we have the best technology? And then compared to our adversaries, who the barriers have been broken down quite a bit. I mean, one can only imagine a couple of years from now as you see, a drone, a privately operated drone landing on the White House, things that are available to the smallest actor, cyber tools most noticeably, but any number of things. So it's not just the state level, but it's technology. The edge that the U.S. military once had is going to be very difficult to keep in the future. So that's the number one area where I think he thinks about our need to compete. Second, in terms of accountability and efficiency. And that is something that I think is going to be near and dear to the hearts of financial managers. We're a competitive organization. We're in a competitive world. We need to take advantage of the business practices of the private sector to learn from them and to try and maybe we'll never be on the leading edge of the Department of Defense and business practices possible, but we need to be near that leading edge and keeping pace with it. And then the third thing is attracting future talent. And we see a couple areas where that's important. Many of you are probably familiar with the Military Retirement and Compensation and Retirement Commission that just reported out about 2 weeks ago, start of this month. They were proposing what sounds like, and what would be big change on the military side to move away from the 20-year cliff vesting defined benefit retirement system to completely change health care from sort of a government-sponsored model to competing, much like many of these are what civilians basically moved to 25, 30 years ago when we moved from CSRS to FAIRS. So big changes, but why did they even propose that? Because they felt like it was what was necessary to attract the next generation of people with more portable benefits, in a nutshell. There's more to it than that, but that's a big thing. But our challenge there is, of course, not limited to our military workforce. I took note, probably many of you who live in this area remember an article that was, I think, on the front page of the Post in December, entitled "Millennials Exit the Federal Workforce as Government Jobs Lose Their Allure." So this is a challenge not just for the military, which is what the Compensation and Retirement Commission was addressing, but also our civilian workforce. And Secretary Carter is very much focused on the need to attract a new generation that doesn't value everything the same way that this generation does, to think about what's going to bring future talent into this organization, the talent that we're going to need. So That's again, three areas where he sees us competing for human capital, competing for technology with our adversaries, and trying to keep pace with the technology, the business practices of the modern world. So this longer-term agenda is what is probably most on his mind, but in the here and now, and starting this afternoon at our hearing, we're going to also have to focus, perhaps regrettably, on the here and now of trying to resolve and remove the threat of sequester. It's hard to get beyond, to get to where we want to be leading and thinking about the future and smart investment, you have to get beyond the damage control phase of trying to avoid falling back into the trap of sequester. So he's going to make the case, and our budget, I'll get to this in a second, our budget's going to make the case for why we need to get out of sequester and start increasing our investment in defense and moving away from kind of a sequester-driven, what's the least we can get by with strategy to how to build a force for the future and how to lead. So we're prepared to make trade-offs, and this department has never been afraid of doing that. And we've had some, even at the budget levels we've been proposing trade-offs that people have not necessarily found palatable. But we'd like to get beyond that to talking about new investments, new technologies, new partnerships, new ways of doing business, and not merely sort of trying to keep ahead of the sequester trap. There's no question we're united at the top levels of the executive branch on this. The President has spoke very forcefully on the day the budget was rolled out that he has never supported sequester as the right answer. He's never settled for sequester as the right answer for our country or for our budget. Every budget that he's proposed since the super committee failed has tried to get us back up to a higher level. Chairman Dempsey has also said that, if the country doesn't want to pay for more defense, we can bring the military down, but we need three things in his view to do that. You need time, and you need some predictability, and you need some flexibility. And we've struggled with Congress on the flexibility part in terms of being able to manage this place and make some of the hard choices. And we've also struggled because of sequester on the predictability. We were up at one level, we dropped down. We've been clawing out of that hole again, and now the question is, what path are we going to take going forward? We would really love to get that resolved so that we can have some plan the way that we would like to plan, and that will yield better, more efficient results for the taxpayer if we can do that. So our budget is consistent with what we've been saying, that we can't stay down where we are. And I had one chart. I don't know if it's available or not available. Okay, so I used this when I did the budget presentation, and I'll talk on this a while, use it as a touchstone. The budget we submitted this year has a couple main characteristics, in my opinion. One is consistency. Consistency with what we've been saying we needed to do, with where we said we needed to go. If you looked at last year's budget, if any of you worked on last year's budget, remembers last year's budget, a great deal of consistency between what we're proposing this year on all the ends when people talk strategy, ways, ends, and means. So in terms of ends, the strategy that we came up with after the Budget Control Act was signed in January of 2012, the Defense Strategic Guidance resulted in a white paper we put out about the things we were trying to accomplish. We have tried to stick as close to that as we can over 2 successive reviews since then, both the Strategic Choices and Management Review that Secretary Carter led when he was the deputy, and then the Quadrennial Defense Review that came out in conjunction with last year's budget. All of those basically adhere to the same basic goals, the pivot to Asia-Pacific region, and all the things that we've talked about have been pretty consistent. And so if I'll just walk you through how this chart kind of talks to that a little bit. We were up at a higher level than any of the lines on this chart before sequester hit. Then when when the Budget Control Act was signed before the Super Committee failed, we knew that we were going to have to take about $500 billion out of our plans over 10 years. And we built a strategy for how we would do that at that level of resources. That's the strategy that I'm talking about that came out in January 2012. That's that kind of light-colored yellowish line at the top. That was the 13 budget. That was what we called, what Admiral Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the time, called the first $500 billion, because he knew enough about resources to kind of guess what was coming. So that's really what the department agreed, that we could do a good strategy at that level. In FY14, we came down a little bit more, about 90 billion more over 10 years. Then Secretary Hagel came in and sequester happened. The mechanical across-the-board sequester that happened in this March of 2013 happened right as Secretary Hagel took over. And he ordered at that time a strategic choices and management review led by Deputy Secretary Carter at the time and by the Vice Chairman. And we explored a range that went all the way down to the red line, which is where sequester is, but really focused on an area sketched out in gray where we thought we could sustain the strategy fairly robustly or with a fair degree of risk, but not completely breaking the strategy. So we identified this gray area in that review in 2013, over a year and a half ago. And what we've done then, you see where sequester in 13 drove us down from the level we'd been at. We've been trying to get back up to that level. That's the level we said we needed to be at. And so I think that there's, if nothing else, a virtue of consistency in our budget, in that we said in 2013, we said in 2014, we're now saying in 2015, that gray area is where the budget needs to be. And that's exactly what this budget tries to do, is move us back up to that region of resources to accomplish these same ends with these same ways and means, pretty much, that we have been saying that we needed. So if you looked at last year's budget, which I don't show in this chart because it would be basically the identical line, this is exactly where we said we were going last year in 2016, exactly where we said last year we would be going in 2017, 2018, 2019. Slight increase in resources from the White House, but very slight. It's pretty much the same fiscal path that we said that we needed to follow. So we've been consistent in messaging that. And also, in addition to sort of having the same ends and the same proposed ways, many of the means are the same. We are trying to build the same size force structure to maintain the same size force structure as we have been saying. So a 300-ship Navy, a 450,000-person active duty Army, same number of fighter squadrons, 11 carriers, 182,000 active Marines, 335 in the Guard. All the things that we've been saying have been messaged before. We're not trying to shrink the force any further, so we think that that's the capacity we need. We are trying to do many of the same proposals for how we then square the circle of building that force, living within that level of resources, requires some painful choices, some hard choices that we have been telling Congress we need to do, and that's restraining the growth of compensation. That's things like retiring the A-10 or putting some cruisers into modernization to extend their life and keep them available longer, the Army's Aviation Restructuring Initiative, BRAC. So there's things that we've been saying we needed to do to afford this level of capacity, this level of readiness that we need, and we are going to continue to push for these things. We think that we have a strong case for them. Again, we have done multiple reviews now and kind of concluded that that's where we need to be. We think that we have some pretty sound proposals on how to get there, how to manage the department. So Secretary Carter taking over today is going to help, again, try and make the case that these budget levels and these policies are the right ones. If you look at, so I think that sequester, unfortunately, my engagements with the press so far have kind of dominated people's thinking. People are fascinated with the idea of, is it going to happen, is it not going to happen, are you going to help cut your own budget down to that level, all these questions. So we're not really talking about what we'd like to be talking about. It's where the country should be, what our level of resources should be. We're talking about how are we going to get out of sequester, are you going to get out of sequester. But we're going to start off making the case, and this is our responsibility, for the resources we think we need. If you think in terms of average kitchen table terms, you know, we've had a flat budget for 3 years, and I think there's going to be legitimate questions from members of Congress and from the public about why do we need more money. We're asking for 7.5% more money than we've lived with for the last 3 years. That seems like a lot. It is a lot of money. It's over a $35 billion increase compared to what we've had. I think that we have a good case about why we need that level of resources. We have been, in my words, surviving but not thriving down at that level of under $500 billion. We're trying to go back to where we were in the early years of this administration before we got run over by the sequester train. We were already at the same level of resources that we're proposing now for FY16. We were there in 10, we were there in FY11, we were there in FY12. The world has only gotten more complex since then. So I think that from sort of the threat side alone, there's a good rationale for why the level of resources needs to go back where it was. And we will be explaining, the Army, Navy, the Air Force, the service chiefs and secretaries, as well as the chairman and the secretary will be out there explaining what it is that we're trying to accomplish with these resources. It's a mixture of trying to dig out of the readiness hole that was created. If you kind of look at how that red line dropped down from where we were and how the green line's trying to take us back up, you kind of see a dipper down there. We're trying to get out of that trough of damaged readiness where we had squadrons that were grounded, we had people that were not able to go through the National Training Center. So that takes some time. It takes time and it takes money. It takes both. It's not just one. We could put an infinite amount of money on that and not fix readiness overnight. In fact, that's one of the things that we're going to be explaining in our budget is that it does take some time to dig out of readiness holes. You can get in them a lot easier than you can get out of them, and we're going to see that play out over the next couple of years. But fixing readiness is one of the primary goals of this budget, but even more so is going to be investing in the future. That's what really suffers in downturns. That's been true my entire 30-year career, and before that as well. In fact, whenever you have a big downturn in defense, it's the investment that takes the hit first because it's very hard to change the size of your force immediately. So about 60% of the increased resources in this budget are going towards investment in our technology, in procurement research, and in our facilities. So again, we will be trying to make the case for why that's important. One of the things that always strikes me in the months since I've had this job, and before a little bit as well, but trying to compare in my mind what it's like to be the CFO of this organization, it strikes me as being a lot of times almost completely different than being CFO of a private sector organization, in that like any organization, we would have the challenge of staying competitive in our sphere, and we live in a very dynamic world. I mean, every day I read the paper with my breakfast to try and figure out what's in the news today that might affect us, and it could be what's the price of fuel doing, it could be what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in Asia, it could be what's happening on Capitol Hill with the budget, with the political situation. So many things affect what we do. And so we live in a competitive and dynamic environment, and if you're trying to stay competitive in that, if you're trying to keep your company, your organization competitive, you would, I think, naturally, the things that we're proposing would make all the sense in the world to you. Right-sizing your footprint if you have more physical infrastructure than you need. To divest a legacy platform that, while it may be useful, is not the future, so that you can free up funds to invest in the future. Or trying to restrain your compensation costs, especially in ways that while maybe your workforce doesn't love every aspect of it, they understand the need to do that, because we spend half of our budget on compensation between military and civilian personnel. So every dollar that we spend there is a dollar we can't spend on readiness or on modernizing our capabilities. So we need to stay competitive, as witness what the Secretary said. We know we need to attract and retain the talent of today and the talent of tomorrow, but there needs to be a balance. And that's one of the things that this budget is about balancing today and tomorrow. But all these things, I think, to me, would make a lot of sense, and I would expect and hope that if perhaps this happens in some future chapter of my life, that I'm in that situation in another organization, that my board of directors would say, that makes some sense to me, to divest in the old, to invest in the new, to right-size our footprint, to look at ways maybe we can restrain our healthcare costs while still attracting the talent we need. But it hasn't worked that way the last couple of years when we've gone to our board. Now, our board works differently, it responds to some different imperatives, but we have gotten more no's than we have yeses on many of these things, and we don't think that can continue. So that to me is one of my challenges in helping Secretary Carter lead the department, is trying to convince people that we need to, if you want us to be competitive, and we need to be competitive. We have, we're an organization at at the tip of our spear. I mean, these are life and death things. So we need to be the best, and that entails some hard choices at times. It also entails, some stability and fixing sequester, but even within that, we need to make some of these decisions. So on the budget side, many challenges. We're also, of course, that's not all that the FM community does. That's a big part of it. But on the audit, we have moved a lot in the time that I've been there. I'm not saying because I've been there, but during the time I've been there, we have moved way down the field. more progress than any previous administration has made or than the department has made in any comparable period of time, I think, but there's still so much more to do. We have moved from sort of the planning stage to talking about it, thinking about it, planning for it, to actually starting it, and that's a good thing. But that's not the end of the story. Anyone who's been around, I've lived in this area for about 30 years now. Anyone who follows the Redskins knows how many great off seasons they have. You always start, you start full of promise. You've got a new coach, you've got a new free agent, whatever, and then reality sets in and they start playing the game. And you know, I don't want that to be us after 3 or 4 years looking back at this audit effort. So. We have started now, and we're actually playing real games, and we have many of the folks here, some of our sponsors are now as IPAs in here, and going to tell us how we're doing, really. And I'm looking at Bob Spear. I mean, Bob's been a real leader at this, and you know, they've worked this hard, and much credit to the Army, Navy, Air Force, much more so than to me, but to all the progress that's been made. But now's where the rubber hits the road when the auditors are actually here. So that's one of the many things that I think is you know, when you think about what does the FM community need to do, what's expected of us, there's getting the resources and spending them wisely. And I think, again, you'll hear the Secretary say that pretty much verbatim this afternoon. But also, it's the accounting part for it afterward. More and more members of Congress are on this issue. I was going to add an adjective, but we're getting a lot more scrutiny on this issue, as we should. You know, I think the time has come where we really need to deliver and not just explain why it's hard. Not that I'm not prepared to do that too, and probably many of you understand why it's hard. But again, in terms of thinking, what is it that we need to be doing as the FM community? We need to be leading on audit. Mark Easton reminds me all the time, you know, we need to also make sure that our colleagues across the department understand we can't do this alone as the FM community, and I think that is still part of the challenge. But they're spending resources wisely. There's the audit. And there's also the professional development of our workforce, which was a big priority of my predecessors, and that is something that has really made progress that I'm proud of as well. I remember seeing the charts about what our plan was, how we were going to roll out the development of our FM online training, and seeing people behind, and I thought, well, I've seen this movie before in so many other areas of life, right, where you know, it will stay behind a statement. Actually, it has not been the case here. Where people have been behind, we've caught up, so that's been gratifying as well. So I think that we are making progress on all fronts. We are struggling, as probably many organizations are, with the challenges of being asked to cut people while we're working on sequester budgets and regular budgets, and we've had in the last couple of years, you know, shutdowns and furloughs. It's been a challenging time, and it's going to stay challenging. I want to thank all the people in this room, all the people in the FM community for everything that you've been doing to keep our defense of this great nation strong. It's been an honor and a privilege, both as the deputy and now as the comptroller, to share this work with you, but there's so much more to be done. And happy to take a few questions if there are any.
Morning. We spend a lot of time investing in our business systems, and I think one of the things that audit's going to show is we have a ways to go still. What do you foresee with the red line of where we might be in audit with the existing business systems we have?
Yeah, I think it would be a real challenge to keep up any kind of level of modernization at that point. We have been able to do some things that I thought maybe were not doable with existing systems on some of the audit things. I know there were some cases where we had real skepticism that we'd be able to make something happen with some of the legacy systems that we really wanted to replace. So If we're not able to, I think that would be the result, if we're not able to keep up that level of investment. But I think that really our challenge is you know, it's twofold, of course. It sometimes is the systems, but I think it's more the business practices. So I think that we would have no choice, and the imperative would remain, and we would just have to do the best we could. I think that you're right, though, that there will be some diminution of investment in new systems if we're down at that level, because you know, we just have to accept that there's things that are going to be higher priorities within each of the military departments and across the department as a whole. And so something's got to suffer if you take, say, $150 billion out over the next 5 years, which is kind of the difference between those red and green lines at this point. And I think that our efforts would be one of the ones that would suffer, along with some things that already have been, like investment in the facilities. So it's, you know, it's human nature, and it's understandable, and things where you feel like you can take a little more risk, that's where you're going to take the risk, and we have seen that already, again, especially on the investment in the facility side. But you know, we have kept this as a priority, the whole audit effort, and including the systems that go with it. And I think that it will stay that. It's not going to be the bottom of the list, but everything's going to have to suffer some, or many areas are going to have to suffer some if we're not able to convince Congress that we need these extra resources. Again, I think that's one of the big burdens that we have over the next couple of years, is explaining why we do need to go back to a higher level of investment. We are not at high levels of investment, I should say, by the way. You know, I'm not wild about the percent of GDP metric. We are at a pretty low percent historically. Certainly we're you know, like 1/2 of where we were maybe 15, 20 years ago, 1/3 of where we were you know, 30 years or 40 years ago. That alone is not a measure, and we're certainly doing better than our allies in that respect. But so I think that we have a reasonable level of resources, and at the level that we're seeking. But the challenge is really, you know, what's the nation willing to pay for? Because really, at the end, all we can sustain. And so if people feel that the deficit's more important, or there can't be agreement on how to resolve this, and you know, because there are ways to pay for this. But if people can't agree on those, then we're going to be stuck, and this will just be one of the many things. This would be one of the many things that we would be discussing across the department. Well, we're going to have to settle for some kind of second best solution, which is not where we should be. And I think, again, that's the point that the Secretary wants to make today, is we sort of have a choice between sort of continuing to argue about kind of muddling through at a sequester level, or arguing 1 year at a time instead of making a decision about a course and then following that course. That's what we'd like to see happen. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Mr.
thanks.
McCord.
Okay, thanks, Deb.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I see a lot of people standing in the back. We still do have chairs, if you'd like to come up and join us. Okay, I now have the great honor to introduce our first morning keynote speaker. It's Dr. Gregory Treverton. He is the chair of the National Intelligence Council within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Director Clapper. Dr. Treverton has extensive background in global risk, in security, and in terrorism. He has been a prolific both researcher and writer on this topic over many, many years. And at this most volatile time in our global situation here, I know that his insights are going to be very useful and very relevant to us. So let's give Dr. Treverton a warm welcome, please.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. This will be a controlled experiment. You'll see whether someone from intelligence who has a background at RAND can actually give a presentation without slides. The timing is opportune for me since we just finished last week the annual threat assessment testimony for Jim Clapper, my boss, and I will use that as my basic text. For me, this is the third period of flux or inflection in the last quarter century. The other two were the fall of communism and 9/11. Now, both of those seem to come with user instructions attached, right? That the fall of communism seemed to say, take a vacation, you've deserved it, and 9/11 seemed to say, attack them over there before they come here. Neither guidance was entirely right, I think, but at least there seemed to be some shape to those particular inflection points. Not so now. It seems to me we're one of those in a very shapeless world, one that probably is less existentially dangerous than the Cold War, but one that is really very shapeless. There's no, in my terms, story that will help us put issues together and decide about priorities. So let me make two general points, then talk about three issues that are at the top of my list of priorities, and then finish with a couple comments on current hotspots. Point one is that in some ways unpredictability is the new normal. We used to talk about world order. In some sense, I think we're facing world disorder. If you look at some of the numbers, the rate of instability, 2014 was the highest since the early 90s. Ditto for the number of people killed by states and state-sponsored killings. And we have the highest number of refugees and internally displaced persons since World War II. Roughly half of the states in the world that are stable could become unstable in the next few years. The second comment is related, and that is the overall uncertainty of the world we live in makes my job and our job very difficult. If you think about the not easy to predict events of the last year, one was the North Korean attack on Sony, the most serious cyber attack against U.S. interests probably ever. There was the Ebola epidemic, and there were the small-scale but dramatic terrorist attacks in Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, and the United States. So as Yogi Berra said, prediction is difficult, especially about the future. That's the challenge we in intelligence face, not trying to predict, but trying to frame issues in a way that will help our policy colleagues do sensible policy. On enduring issues, top of my list is cyber. There we've seen increasing number of attacks, sophistication of attacks on the United States, the most serious ones done by states. While I think it's true that a catastrophic, a cyber Armageddon, a major strategic strike is unlikely, since after all, every attack tells the country attacked where the vulnerability is, and we immediately begin to fix that vulnerability. Rather, what we imagine will continue to be a steady stream of attacks like the ones we've seen. And we saw 2014 marked first by the Iranian attack against Las Vegas Sands, and then the North Korean attack against Sony in November. Though those states obviously are among the less capable of our adversaries, still the fact that they could do that demonstrates the challenge of cyber for us. And if we look at the more sophisticated states, particularly China and Russia, it turns out, is better than we had earlier assessed, that will be the focal point. With respect to non-state actors, the so-called cyber caliphate, as you remember, successfully hacked CENTCOM's Twitter account and YouTube page in January, and 2 weeks ago hacked Newsweek magazine's Twitter handle. Still, the most pervasive form of cyber attack will continue to be those directed against financial institutions. Those hacked in 2014 are sort of a who's who of the financial world: JP Morgan, Home Depot, Target, Neiman Marcus, Anthem, and others. The other point I think about cyber is there's a shift in focus. We've been focused on attacks that disrupted, denial of service attacks. Increasingly, I think the challenge will be attacks that get inside and disrupt data, perhaps without us even knowing it's happened. Second on my list of priorities is China. Two senses. China, it seems to me, is likely to face bumps in the road as we go forward. The bumps seem likely. Exactly what they will be, whether they'll be positive or negative for us, is harder to say. But China's at a very interesting point. Under President Xi Jinping, he's trying an ambitious reform agenda that does put strain on domestic cohesion. Meanwhile, the slowdown in the Chinese economy is reducing those strains, particularly for a Communist Party whose legitimacy rests mostly on delivering the economic goods. It doesn't prove anything, but correlation suggests that $17,000 a year in per capita income is an interesting threshold. And China is nearing that threshold. Virtually every economy that's not an oil producer that's gotten to that level has had a pretty dramatic slowdown in growth. There are good economic reasons for that, and China has already begun slow growth, though 6% looks pretty good if you're sitting in the United States, not so good if you're sitting in China. And by the same token, Freedom House lists, again with the exception of the oil-producing countries, all of the countries over 17,000 per capita are either in the free or partly free category, but China is plainly not. It's in the not free, and so that does, I think, suggest that interesting times are ahead for China. Meanwhile, the other big fact is that the old China we knew and didn't exactly love but worked well with, that is a China that was focused on economics and above all didn't want trouble with the United States, that's gone. That's gone. The current leadership is prepared to be more nationalistic, to assert Chinese roles with respect to us and others. It still wants good relations with us, but it's more willing to be assertive. Meanwhile, it's continuing to modernize its forces in all those ways, particularly to offset what it perceives as our advantages, particularly in being able to project power close to China. Third on my list is terrorism. Terrorism continues. In some ways, the good news is that not many Americans are killed by terrorism. I always upset audiences when I observe that more Americans get killed by, aside from the battle zones, more Americans get killed by lightning or in bicycle accidents than by terrorism. But still, terrorism, because it's so unpredictable, goes from 0 to 60 faster than any other issue in American politics. And worldwide, the killing has been dramatic. The 2014 looks like it'll be the most killing from terrorism in the last 45 years. So far, in 9 months, 31,000 people have died in 13,000 attacks. Now, half of those attacks and fatalities have been in just 3 countries, Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. ISIL conducted more attacks than any other group in the first months, but we've seen, particularly in Europe, probably what remains for the Europeans and for us, the most worrisome threat, and that is the lone wolves, the ones that get radicalized by some combination of travel, internet, and conduct lone wolf attacks. We know that all of the groups, ISIL, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and most recently Al-Shabaab, are calling on their supporters to conduct attacks where they can, come to the war zones if they can, but do damage elsewhere if they can't. Of the 13 attacks in the West since last May, 12 were basically individuals, radicalized individuals. And that probably remains the biggest threat for us. We know the numbers of people that have ventured into the fight, the would-be jihadis who have traveled to the fight, come from 80 countries, maybe more than 20,000, including 3,400 from Western countries and about 180 Americans. And those are the ones we've identified. But still, those coming back, plus those that radicalize in place, probably is the biggest threat we face on the terrorism front. Now, 2 hot spots. I'm a lapsed Europeanist by training. I focused on Europe during the Cold War and was really happy when the Cold War ended because, quite apart from anything else, it was boring intellectually. So, and then after the end of the Cold War, I haven't been very interested in Europe, But now I'm interested again. It's a very interesting place in flux, lots of flux. The Eurozone crisis isn't over. Plus, there are the pressures by the Scotlands and the Catalonias to become independent states. In that sense, Europe is sort of the prisoner of its own success. If you're Catalonia or Scotland, you don't need Britain or Spain as long as you've got the broader economic union. The focal point these days, though, is Russia, Crimea, Ukraine. It's in some ways déjà vu all over again, but not quite. It's a very different set of conflicts, but it's one I think particularly the Europeans have been slow to understand is a real threat to their interests. I think we have to take Putin at his word. He does feel like he's been dissed for 15 years by the West, determined to restore Russia's grandeur, doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO, takes Crimea as a done deal, and that's going to continue. That pushing in to increase Russian influence in its near abroad, in its neighbors, is going to continue, and the chances of a miscalculation, I think, given how isolated Putin is, are really pretty considerable, given that some of the states he might want to meddle in, the Baltics, are NATO members covered by Article 5 commitments. So it is, I think, a dangerous time. It's an odd dangerous time because in the long run, all of the trends are going against Russia, and in many respects, most of the things Putin is doing are accelerating Russia's decline. But as the old saying has it, in the long run, we're all dead, and the next few years are going to be, I think, a particularly dangerous period. Finally, let me just say a few words about ISIL. I was giving an after-dinner speech my second week on the job. I'm now about 6 months into the job, and I said that I had studiously avoided the Middle East my entire career. I said, that's over. Or as the kids would say, that's so over. So I've had a rapid education on the Middle East, mostly around ISIL. I find the tangle of issues in the Middle East makes me think, I was right. All right, I should have stayed away from it. I was having a conversation with my British counterpart, the chairman of their Joint Intelligence Committee, and I said, have you ever known a set of issues that cuts in so many directions simultaneously? And he said, no. You can't fight ISIL without helping Assad. Right? You can't fight ISIL without being a partner in some loose sense of Iran. Right? So it is a very complicated situation. What we see is that ISIL is increasing its influence outside of Iraq and Syria, and therefore we worry about the spillover of the conflict to instability in Lebanon, Jordan, even Saudi Arabia. In Iraq, making some strides, and so is Prime Minister al-Abadi. ISIL's ability to conduct large-scale operations there has been degraded by the combination of our airstrikes, by the improved, shall we say, performance of the Iraqi security forces, by the Peshmerga, by the Shia militants, and also by the Iranians. We're doing better, I think, in Iraq than in Syria. In Syria, the regime has made gains. The opposition isn't in a position to topple it, and that looks like it will continue. Meanwhile, 200,000 people have been killed, and millions of refugees have spread from that particular conflict. That's not a very happy circumstance on which to end, but let me end there and look forward to your questions and comments. I'm happy to be taken to other areas or other countries that I haven't talked about. Thank you. Stunned.
Since this is a group of financial managers, I'm curious about the financing of groups like ISIL and everything, and how we in the government are watching that. Are there things that we can do to influence other parties to make sure that the funding doesn't get where it's supposed to go, and how are we tracking that?
That's a good question. I think that's an area where we've actually improved quite a lot. The terrorism financing, the Treasury Department's very active, so I think we're doing a better job there. The problem is that terrorism isn't all that expensive, and we've seen some oil sales by ISIL. A lot of their weaponry they've just seized when they overrun Iraqi security forces' locations. But they do face a challenge. I think in the longer run, for ISIL particularly, the challenge is twofold. It's the challenge of governing territory, to which they're committed by creating a caliphate, and that does take more money. And we've already seen some reports of dissatisfaction from people living in ISIL-controlled areas about the level of social services and general governance. The other question about ISIL, I think, is whether their sheer brutality, which seems so far to have been a grimly effective recruiting tool for some young men, whether in the long run it will become a liability. We saw that with al-Qaeda, whose liability was being seen as killing too many innocent Muslims, and it seems to me it has to be a liability at some point for ISIL, but not yet. So on the money front, I think we're doing reasonably well. The problem is terrorism isn't very expensive, and they've managed indigenous resources ranging from oil to ransoms, and have been able to do reasonably well at financing themselves. So it's a continuing preoccupation, to be sure.
From the other side, I thought, again, being financial managers, our so-called allies, particularly in Asia, their resources and their budgets need to be aligned with ours. Europe has got a lot of problems themselves. Is there any motion to that effect?
So far, I think from our perspective, most of the motion is in the wrong direction. You see defense budgets in Europe going down, not up. Our Asian allies, a mixed picture, but our Asian allies have always been different. I mean, Japan still has its restrictions on action, and Korea is very focused on Korea. So it does come back, as we look particularly for help in the military arena, comes back again and again to Europe, and there simply there's less capacity than we would like, and the numbers are mostly going in the wrong direction, not the right direction.
Dr. Treverton, can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts about, you mentioned the strength of the EU and what that empowerment that gives to Scotland, but what about the instability of the EU with regards to the euro and the countries on the periphery who are struggling with that? What does that do for security there, and how does that impact our national security?
Okay. Really good question. As I said, the Eurozone crisis is, from my view, far from over. One of the few successful predictions I ever made, I wrote at the very beginning of the euro, 15, 16 years ago, that it was a bad idea. It was a particularly bad idea because it was predictable that some shock, we didn't know what it would be, but some shock would affect part of the union, but not the whole union, and then there would be trouble. You know, when a shock affects Texas, Texas would like to devalue the Texas dollar, but it can't. But in the United States, there are fiscal stabilizers. When something bad happens in Texas or California, they pay less taxes and get more transfers from the federal government. In the union, there's no such mechanism. There is no union budget to speak of, at least as a budget, but it all goes for agriculture and support to poor regions. So it was predictable that something like this would happen. Exactly how it would happen and what its implications would be, not so easy. But I don't think it's over, and it is a big uncertainty about the union, its cohesion. It's at least a preoccupation. And I think it's part of the reason that focus so much on inward, on how to work out these continuing crises in Greece and other places. I think that's been at least a distraction, and maybe part of the reason why the Europeans have been so slow to understand the real implications of the Russia crisis. Though one has to say, I've been surprised at how our European allies, especially Germany, how willing they've been to go along with sanctions. I suppose it's a commentary to the limits of Putin's abilities that he managed to anger his best friend in Europe, Angela Merkel. Not a wise move, not a good piece of statesmanship, and I think a good happening for us as we try and keep our allies with us over sanctions.
Dr. Treverton, I was wondering if you could shed some light on the situation regarding the opening of the Arctic from a national intelligence perspective and how it's going to impact the United States and particularly the DoD budget.
It's a good question. I should have a good answer to it. I don't. It's something very much on our radar. We've been thinking a lot about it. It's obviously a complicated set of issues. We want obviously to proceed in the most peaceful and economically beneficial way. I'm just sorry, I don't have a very good, forgive me, this is one I need to go do my homework on. I'll hopefully have a better answer next time. It's been sort of at the edge of my radar screen. It hasn't really gotten to the middle. Forgive me.
Dr. Treverton, another curveball for you. I'm with the U.S. Coast Guard, so the question is about the Western Hemisphere and your thoughts on the instability and violence of transnational criminal organizations in our hemisphere.
It's certainly a big deal. You know, by some respects, Caracas may be the most violent city on earth. It's hard to know because the statistics vary across regions, but it is a big problem, and it's a continuing spillover. We've seen a couple of episodes of transnational organized crime and terror groups getting a little close together. I think that's mostly not the problem. The problem is simply that transnational organized crime groups and the havoc they can reach, both for local governance and for spillover effects on us. So it's a very big issue. It's an issue both for us and for our partners. In that sense, there's an opportunity to work together. I think that's important, but it's a big deal. We have a national intelligence officer for transnational threats who mostly spends his time on terrorism, but not exclusively. Transnational organized crime is a very big part of his portfolio as well. So it's something much on our minds, and as we think about the stability of various countries in the Western Hemisphere, Latin America, probably the more immediate effects are going to be from falling oil and commodity prices, which has some benefits for many countries like Mexico, but some real negatives for some of the other countries, maybe including Brazil. So those are the more immediate effects. But in the longer run, the scourge of organized crime is really very much of concern.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, there are still more seats up in the front for folks who want to come up here. We're staying on our agenda, I'm pleased to say. I'm very, very honored to now introduce our second morning keynote, the Honorable Gwendolyn Sykes. Welcome her back. She is a great friend and a former colleague in the DoD and is no stranger to ASMC. Gwen has an extremely impressive and varied background as a public official, everything from being the first African-American female to hold the position of CFO of NASA. She's also been the CFO of Yale and Morehouse College, and obviously now she is the CFO for the U.S. Secret Service. So in that capacity is dealing with a very, very important executive agency whose scope has tremendously increased over the last several years, and she is here to share with us her insights in this regard. So let's give Gwen a warm welcome.
Good morning. Oh, come on. Good morning. All right, that sounds good to me. Well, I'm happy to be home again, as you did say, Deb. I haven't been here in a while. Shh, and we won't say it's only been a couple years. I just turned 21, okay? And I am pleased to report that I work at the good Department of Homeland Security, and we have money for Friday. So, of course, poor Deb, I called her last Friday and I said, you know, if Congress doesn't work out, I might not be able to speak to y'all on Tuesday. So I was tempted to send her an email on Saturday and say, yeah, I guess I can talk to you guys. So I'm glad to be here, glad to be home, and just want to take an opportunity to talk with you about a few things. First of all, when they called and asked me to come and speak at the American Society of Military Comptrollers, I still pay my dues. I said, why me? I'm over at Homeland Security. We don't have any money. Okay. So, of course, you know, she's like, well, we need your charts by noon. And I'm like, I'm trying to shut down the United States Secret Service. But I'll get them to you. So I said, you know, why am I speaking with you? Well, first of all, it's good to be home. I do work at the Secret Service. It is where it's my home. And I see my counterpart here from Coast Guard. Good to see you. But DOD is kind of my heritage. Everywhere I have a tendency to go and work, be it Department of Homeland Security, my time at NASA, the time that I spent at Yale University and Morehouse College, there's a certain thing about being a good, solid financial manager from the Department of Defense and having that basis. It's called credibility, and it's called the ability to know command and control and how to do it right, okay? And that's one of the skills that I've been able to take to each and every one of these places that I've been to. And it's a great skill to have because it's actually in demand, okay? But one of the things that I'm going to challenge you guys to think about today is how can we make those three things work for us, okay? We have been submitting a little challenge, and I know Mr. McCord talked about it, the audit. Come on now, everybody kind of get excited about that. The audit, you know, the opinion, you know, the clean one. Okay, I've been in an agency where they didn't have a clean opinion, okay? I was at NASA when they didn't get a clean opinion. Anybody in here from NASA? Good, okay. Rumor has it it's one of the best places to work, so yeah, they're all probably over there at the moment. But that's one of the challenges I'm gonna focus on today. But another thing is that I worked over there in the good Secretary of Defense Comptroller, so I'll have a few stories that I can share with you about that. Of course, I cut my teeth at Department of Defense at the Defense Business Operation Fund, DBOF. That's exactly what it means. Nothing else, other acronyms. And of course, working in program and financial control, watching the budget line go up and the budget line go down, okay? But we have to all recognize that the last 4, 8, 12 years have been pretty challenging for all of us in the financial community. We get those opportunities in order to make some headway in financial management. They start training us. They start giving us funding to do some of those systems modernizations that we needed to do and enhance. And then the next thing you know, the debt rises, a new Congress or president comes in, and everything goes away. We have sequestration, we have increasing debt, gridlock, and everything else associated with that. You guys really had fun during sequestration. You actually furloughed a lot of folks, okay? We at Department of Homeland Security had to furlough a lot of folks, okay? Can you imagine us over at the United States Secret Service trying to figure out who we're gonna furlough in protection of the United States president? Kind of hard. Okay, but we have to make these financial decisions, and guess what we have to make these financial decisions based on? The financial dollars, the financial records, okay? So that's going to be kind of important as we move on. But I can't imagine that as the time goes on with our Congress, particularly since I don't have a budget right now, that it's going to get any better anytime soon. So, why am I speaking to you? Some of the things that we definitely do have in common right now, fighting that opportunity called ISIS. Globally, it is a very big threat. It's something that we are paying attention to along with you in the Department of Defense. And it's just one of those areas that are costing us on a daily basis a lot of resources, time, energy, and money. UAVs. Can you imagine? I'm thinking, oh, great, I'm going to either have a snow day or delayed arrival. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, my cell phone starts going off, the work one, not the personal one. Because some nice little guy from another unnamed government agency decides that he's going to have a snow day and start flying a little UAV in Washington, D.C. Really? Okay. So we at the good Secret Service scrambled early that morning. Lots of hazmat folks out there, trying to get this lovely UAV. We assessed it. It wasn't a danger. Procured it. And of course, the resources, I'm sitting here kind of feeling like the ticker tape, cha-ching, 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 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, great, we're in a CR, overtime. What if this thing blows up? I would probably be happy. It'd be an easier cleanup. I'm going through these things. Can you imagine, from 3 o'clock in the morning to about 12 noon, when they finally came into my office, they said, we found him. Of course, my guys were highly motivated. Of course, the gentleman called his office and then called us, because his boss told me, you better call the Secret Service fast. So he called us, and when he called, it was kind of like, hello, I think that's my UAV. We, of course, went and got him very quickly. Okay, and had lots of conversations with him. But we didn't know, okay? That was an innocent opportunity. He was just flying his UAV. But think about what those things can actually carry, okay? We have a lot of the mail delivery services, Amazon.com. They're contemplating delivering your packages with those, okay? I don't know about you, but when I order from Amazon.com, if I go on, I try to order one book, and I end up getting 3 or 4 because they say if you bundle this, you get a cheaper price. Come on now, how many of y'all got caught on that one? Okay? So I'm thinking if Amazon can get my 4 to 6 books that I order on one of those UAVs and ship it to my house, what else can I put on that UAV and ship it where and do what? Okay? So while they're cute flying around, while you can use them to take photos for great opportunities at your weddings, etc., for us in our world, given the folks that we deal with on a daily basis and that you deal with on a daily basis, it's a pretty bad piece of equipment, okay? And we have to figure out technology to track it, trace it, and deal with it, okay? And that's something that we definitely have in common, and we've been working with a lot of your entities within the Department of Defense. Of course, international and domestic terror. Okay, ladies, I'm a little pissed because I personally might have to go after these folks if they mess with my shopping malls, okay? Ferragamo does not have a store in normal streets, okay? So if they mess with my department stores, it's over, okay? I'm taking my own tactical troop in, and if any of you guys want to join me, okay? But terrorism is a threat. It is a challenge. On our daily lives, we are going to be impacted from anything from food delivery, from our banking, okay? Can you imagine being at the good Secret Service during Christmas time? And our folks have to go and say, hey, ring, ring, ring. Good morning. Hi, Target. We're the United States Secret Service. You've been hacked, okay? And then the impact that it had on all of us during the holiday season, psychologically, out there shopping. And then the next thing you know, Neiman Marcus. Then the next thing you know, Michael's. Then the next thing you know, Marshall's, okay? All these impact us, are acts of what I would consider terrorism, because of the psychological impact that it has on me and my day-to-day business and what I do for myself personally. It's a challenge, and it's something that we definitely share between ourselves and the Secret Service. The other opportunity, of course, that we have is protection. You have a bigger protection mission than I. Mine is, of course, protection of the monetary system, which I enjoy. I like money. That's one of my favorite things. But also, you have the opportunity of protecting the United States in general, and also protecting what we all live and breathe about, which is freedom. which is something very tantamount for the Department of Defense to be able to do. But while we're trying to do that, we have to make sure that we do something very well. And this is the group that does it. It's called Financial Management and Resource Management. And in order to do that, we need a few things, okay? And they sound kind of simple. We need good financial systems. How many of you have great financial systems that you operate on a day-to-day basis? Hello? Hello, anybody out there? Okay. Okay, if you could just tweak it a little bit. No? Well, I'd like to think that the Department of Defense has made a little bit of headway. I mean, I have to admit, when I went to NASA, I'm going to tell on them, to do their transformation and their financial transformation. I remember they said, congratulations, you are now the the national, NASA's CFO. Wonderful. And you have just now inherited 10 different and unique financial systems. Ah, no problem. And 153 subsystems. Huh? 150 what? 153 subsystems that somehow connect into that, okay? And oh, by the way, of those 10 different and unique financial systems at NASA, 5 of them are either on COBOL or Fortran. I became the CFO at NASA in 2002. I'm not going to tell you when I graduated from college, but it was a long time before that. And I remember Cobalt and Fortran. And believe it or not, we were able to do it successfully. We did make the migration. Okay, we made the migration to SAP. Oh, and by the way, it was the beta version. NASA, they do a lot of things first, okay? But we did it. We made it happen, okay? And I do recognize that we have made some milestones and some inroads at Department of Defense when it comes to financial management. We have made some milestones and inroads as it has related to the financial systems. I think I'm going to date myself a little bit. When I came around, it was like 700. I think you're down to what, 600? Okay, just kidding. But that's one of the challenges. You've got to have a good system in which to work off of and a system of record. Problem disbursements, have they gone away for you guys? Yeah, well, that's going to be a problem forever. But something that you can actually deal with. The systems will help you do that, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. And of course, unliquidated obligations, I deal with those over at the Good Secret Service a lot. But one of the key foundations that you guys do have, and that a lot of people mirror no matter where I go, is the PPBES system, program planning, budgeting, and execution. Everywhere I go, when they say the budget is broke, the first thing that they go to is PPBS, the way that Department of Defense does it, okay? As you probably have known, we've had a few challenges at the Secret Service. And we had that lovely blue ribbon panel. And one of their findings was the budget, okay? These gentlemen at the Good Secret Service are excellent at protection of our monetary infrastructure. I'm happy about that. I like money. Sorry about that. And they're also awesome when it comes to protecting our president and any other dignitaries. I wouldn't say they're the best budgeteers, and that's okay. That's why they hire the folks that look and have the responsibility and the education like us. So we're actually building that team. And guess what? I tease folks when I go to work now, because I've been there at the Good Secret Service for 3 years, and I've been transforming that whole financial team. And I have one of the colonels here, but I tease people, I said, I have 2 colonels. I got C1 and C2. 1 Army, 1 Marine Corps. I'm looking for an Air Force and a Navy. Okay, I'm sorry. Then I'll have my whole Purple Force, okay? But these are the folks that come with the financial foundation in order to help move us along, okay? So this is the team that can make it happen. I know it can, okay? And of course, DOD will get at some point in time a clean audit opinion. That lovely little yellow thing there is what you're thinking, okay? Not in our lifetime. I'm going to challenge each and every one of you to rethink that statement. And that statement should read, in my lifetime. and while I'm here, okay? McCord can't do it by himself. The ASF Assistant Secretaries of Financial Management cannot do it by themselves. They can come in, they can come and have great conversations with you and tell you, let's get this done, but each and every one of you sitting out here are the folks that are going to be able to get this done. And let me show you how, because I've done it. Smaller scale, but we can take this on. First of all, let's just focus on 3 key things. You ready? Data, 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 okay? The financial transactions are going to be key, and the information going into the systems, no matter how bad, archaic, old, if we could tweak it, we could do something a little bit better, that's where we need to focus. Resource management, we have that hands down already. PPBES, we have a structure, we have a rigor, we have an opportunity of what is repeatable on a consistent basis. That's how you get these billions and trillions of dollars of budget, resources, okay? I'm still looking for mine. And that will be the key that will get you to the clean audit opinion. These things what we actually do with the data on a daily basis. You collect the data in your transactions, you move them forward in your processing of your systems. The systems may not be the greatest, but at least take the opportunity to document what it does do and what it does do well, and repeat it early and often, okay? So any of you auditors in the room, leave. I'm giving them the keys, okay, to a clean audit opinion, okay? Then if you're able to repeat it early and often, then you are laying the foundation for moving financial management forward and getting closer to that clean opinion. And then you start preparing those financial statements, okay? No matter how robust the system is or how bad you think the system is, if the system is capturing the data in which it was intended, if you can produce reports that show the information that has been put into that system, and you can repeat that process in any of those areas that are a bit of a challenge, that Herculean that you have to overcome, come up with a compensating control. Have you heard your auditors talk about that? Compensate. I compensated my control butt off when I implemented SAP, okay? Because it was the beta. But I had a repeatable process that I did over and over again that showed them that no matter what I did or how differently they thought I should have done it, it was repeatable, it was I could document it, and the same outcome happened, okay? And once I was able to continue to produce that financial statement, we got the clean opinion. So why is the clean opinion so important? It's just a clean opinion. It's just somebody's opinion from the auditors, okay? You have to rely on the data in order to do the analytics, in order to bring yourselves or bring ourselves to the table to now have a different conversation about getting a clean opinion and driving the future of the organization, okay? So what I'm trying to challenge each and every one of you in this room, because I know you can do it, is let's get over this little hurdle called the audit, and let's go get at the big girls table and talk about where we think the Department of Defense needs to go. Anybody want to join me? That's the simple rubrics about what it really is, okay? It sounds simple, but we also have to do this in a coordinated fashion. Financial systems are going to be the underpinning of that, okay? But also we have to recognize that we're working in a very interesting environment. You know, all the sequestration and of course the emerging budget administration coming up. Little case in point, if you start doing it now, by the time you get to the new administration, because I'm going to let y'all in on a little secret, Obama's not going to run again. I got that on good authority. I'm still checking on Hillary, but I do know that Obama's not running, okay? So during this time phase, it gets a little bit interesting. We all know that as financial managers, because of course we're going to have a new president. This is the time, if I had to really challenge each and every one of you, out there in the financial core, this is the time in which you want to strike to get this clean opinion, okay? Really take the opportunity to lean forward, press forward, because the resources are somewhat there. And as a financial resource, and I did say I like money, right? Revenues are going up, folks are getting employed, so taxes are being paid. The deficit overall is going down, so therefore there's a little bit more money on the table for all of us. So before we get to a new administration and potentially when the debt might go back up again, this would be a great opportunity to do some of those things that I talked about. Repeatable processes in your financial system. Compensating controls. You got that one down? Okay. And repeating it and producing those financial statements and leaning on your auditors to make it happen. It will get you a clean audit opinion. You can get audit ready. You can have repeatable closing procedures, which you already do. And a matter of fact, I've been borrowing from the good Department of the Air Force some of your closing procedures. Internal controls, okay? All this opportunity will start moving you quite closer to that clean opinion and getting you past that hurdle and to the table about where we want to shape and move the Department of Defense. I know it's an elephant, okay? It's real, it's big. I already know that. It's not a rabbit, it's not a cow, and it's not a cat. It's an elephant, okay? I recognize that because I'm pretty sure how many of you guys are out there say, does she know what she's talking about? Okay. I've been where you've been. I've had folks come here and tell me, oh, the audit's a great thing and we can solve the problem, okay? But I really do believe that this is the cadre of folks. I think if we really get folks together, talk audit readiness in a different manner, that the Department of Defense can get a clean opinion, we will get into a place where, because again, this is my heritage, so I love you guys, get into a place where we no longer have to worry about an opinion, and we can use the data that we have done so well, and we can use that information to shape the strategic conversations with regards to resources, shape where we need to be, and start tackling some of these emerging things that are happening, ISIS, UAVs, terrorism, okay? And focusing on doing that. Focusing on using resources to really take care of our veterans coming home when they have gone out to battle to take care of us. And that thing that we so pride ourselves on called freedom, okay? That's what our real role is here at the Department of Defense in my home. Okay. Any questions? I just rah-rah-rah you, no questions. Great, gotta go.
Good morning, ma'am. My question pertains to UAVs and modern-day security concerns. Now, one of the happiest moments of my youth was flying a model airplane with my old man.
Just don't do it around the White House.
Roger that, ma'am. Now, with that said, how is it that we're going about tempering fear and speculation and balancing it against safety and security when funding programs such as UAV regulation and restrictions, ma'am?
Well, I don't think there should be a fear with regards to things flying in the air. You know, in Alaska, I'm originally from Alaska, by the way. We had things flying in Alaska, a lot of them some not so commercial planes, and some of them had bathrooms and they would let things out the back of the planes. And we always were used to things flying and there wasn't a fear, we had an idea what it was, okay? But this isn't Alaska, okay? I wouldn't say that we are going to try and limit everything, but we have to be insightful as we go about looking at opportunities associated with UAVs. So yes, I would love for Amazon to deliver my books at my home, but there has to be parameters, there has to be security features, and come on, how many of you guys have iPhones in here? Okay? Your iPhone can probably tell you with the Amazon hookup, if we do this right, what time your books got there and how they were dropped off and where they were actually placed them so that you don't have to go, did they put them underneath the seat or someplace else? Okay? So our iPhone's technology is good. It's just in the way in which we use it. But the fear factor is, yes, if you're landing a UAV in the White House and we kind of didn't know that you were flying it and who it belongs to, that's a challenge. The good news is that the technology was there, that one, we could kind of figure out where it came from. Number two, there was some markings on it so we could figure out how to go track it down. But it's just one of those things that we've got to balance. There is a business interest, and then there's the bad interest. So for everything that's good that we do in technology, there's somebody out there, unfortunately, that's trying to use it in a not so good way. Credit cards. Wow, I thought that was the best thing since popcorn. I'm back to cash because of where I work. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'am?
Yes. Where you at? Oh, there
Over
you
here.
go. Hi.
Mario Beckles, Army Budget Office.
Yay! Okay. My budget officer's from the Army. He's a
Okay,
colonel. Go ahead.
Good. I just have a question in terms of, there have been a lot of additional demands or workload with additional details for family member security, overall threat. I mean, more or less, you have more demands for your services, for your agents. But it seems as though your FTE lines has been pretty steady over the past several years. Are you getting any support from Homeland Security or the Congress to get you the additional personnel that you need to get the job done?
Can I send you to Capitol Hill with my new director? Yes, you are indeed right. There has been an increased demand for our personnel. We have actually two divisions. We have what we call the uniform division. Those are the guys in the black pants, the white shirts around the White House. They call it the uniform division. And then we have what we call our special agents. You're right, it has been quite a challenge with our workforce and also trying to make that home-to-work balance. I'm going to tell you that our gentlemen are committed 24/7, 365. The world never sleeps. And honestly, this is the first agency that I can honestly say that I never sleep, okay? It is a very demanding. If it's demanding at my level, I can only imagine what it is for my agents and my UD officers on a day-to-day basis. The good news is in the FY16 budget submit that we just provided to Congress, it is for enhancement and actually growing our workforce. It's the first time that we've had to really shape and build a model for the emerging trends, threats, and challenges that we're seeing coming down the table. And let me tell you how this works. We have a clean audit opinion. Nobody asks me about the audit. But I am now, if you haven't heard, or the Blue Ribbon Panel, prior to my arrival, I used to report to an agent, then to the deputy director, and then to the director. Given the fact that all the financial statements, the reporting, the year-end closing, all that's done, and they never worried about it, I am now been elevated as of February 8th, sir? Yes, February 8th, as one of the key members at the table at the Secret Service, and I'm sitting at the table with the other mission-related folks that talk about the UAVs, that talk about protecting the president and all our other dignitaries. I sit at the table with them and talk about strategically using our funds in order to enhance our mission as we move forward. I enjoy that conversation more so than mitigating, compensating controls, okay? That's a more exciting conversation. And being at the table to build a model using financial data in order to justify the real number of UD and the real number of special agents that we need in the future and what we need to grow to was a much better use of my time and my talent than compensating controls, okay? And that's where I think the Department of Defense needs to be, okay? Any other questions? Comments, concerns? Are we gonna do this? That wasn't convincing, but go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. That's just what we needed. An URA speech and a HUA speech. Thank you. Okay, before we take a break, we have the best part of our morning program, and it's now to recognize our Washington Chapter Award winners. I'd like to invite Ms. Ariane Whittemore up, who is our ASMC Washington Chapter President, Mr. Al Reynolds, who's our Executive Director, and Mr. Robert Cook, who is going to be facilitating this with our awardees. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Deb said, I have the best part of this whole program today. Al and I get to recognize the outstanding financial professionals in the defense and military community for their 2014 accomplishments. Today, what we'll be doing is recognizing 9 individual award winners in areas such as budgeting, accounting, financial management, cost analysis, and other financial-related areas. And we'll have 2 team winners, one for a small team, one for a large team in the same areas. This is a distinct pleasure of ours to be able to recognize these outstanding financial professionals from across the Department of Defense and the Coast Guard. Al?
Well, it's wonderful to recognize these award winners, and I just appreciate being a part of this, and thank you to everyone who submitted nominations. It's very important that we recognize these folks, and let's get it done. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. The first award winner this morning, Accounting and Finance Achievement Award, Greg Robertson. He's from the United States Coast Guard Surface Forces Logistics Center. I'm sure Greg Robertson would love to join us. All right, there he is. As a result of internal controls Mr. Robinson implemented for inventory, the Surface Forces Logistics Centers achieved 99.9% inventory accuracy. Wow. For operating materials and supplies, the on-time delivery of the correct part, the correct location at the correct time, was instrumental in achieving asset operational availability for the Coast Guard. His achievement reflects great credit upon himself, the Surface Forces Logistics Center, and the United States Coast Guard. The next award is Resource Management Achievement. Lieutenant Commander Jamie Embry. United States Coast Guard, Personnel Allowance and Staffing Division. Commander Embry demonstrated exceptional leadership, stewardship, and expertise as the Personnel Allowance List Team Leader. During this period of increased fiscal scrutiny, Colonel Embry worked tirelessly to increase fidelity and position tracking, ensuring Coast Guard leadership had key data to make organizational decisions and ensure units were properly staffed according to organizational intent. Her great work reflects good credit upon herself and the Coast Guard. Next awardee is Commander Beck. I got to question Commander Beck's, priorities. He just had a baby, and he's coming here to receive an award. I guess you're leaving right afterward? Well, he's a great American. He led a military and civilian contractor team and prepared a $13 billion financial statement for external audit. Wow. Additionally, he led the U.S. Coast Guard's Budgetary Resource Management Audit, Remediation and Improvement Obligation Lifecycle Management Oversight, directly supporting the Coast Guard's second clean audit opinion. His accomplishments reflect great credit upon him, the Budget Execution Division, and the United States Coast Guard. Next category, audit achievement, Mai Nguyen, Naval Audit Service. Using statistical analysis, Ms. Gwynn identified and remedied several vulnerabilities within the Department of Navy's Funeral Honors Support Program. This was a challenging task requiring a detailed comparative analysis of over 240,000 payments and 476,000 attendance records for over 5,600 reservists. Ms. Gwynn's excellent leadership on audit of funeral honors division, this is good, are in keeping with the best traditions of the Navy. Financial Systems Achievement, Michelle Chapman, United States Coast Guard Acquisitions Directorate, Office of Resource Management. Ms. Chapman is recognized for superior performance in development, implementation, and management of the Chief Acquisition Officer's primary data mart tools, most notably Acquisition Performance Management System, the Strategic Plan Performance Management Dashboard, and the Funding Request Workflow Portal. By developing and implementing an automated means to track financial metrics and performance data, she provided leadership with the information required to manage over 20 programs and make tough decisions for over a $10 billion appropriation. Internee Trainee Award, Melissa Kurth, Marine Corps Systems Command. Ms. Kurth developed a guidebook that will be used beginning in FY 2015 throughout the financial management community and Marine Corps. This will reduce system administration time associated with onboarding and facilitate development of rotational assignments to enhance learning opportunities. Wow, her work during limited staff availability and high workload within the program reflect great credit upon her, the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps Systems Command. Contractor Support Award, Denise Abrams, Air Force District, Washington, FMOA. Ms. Abrams is well, she's reported to be an exceptional leader, and I'm sure she is, and superior performer as lead of the Project Suite team. She researched and deobligated over 650 closed and closing documents valued at over $45 million. Wow. Her overall efforts were instrumental in liquidating $88 million, which strengthened the Air Force's programs. Her accomplishments reflect great credit upon herself, her contract and support organization, and the Air Force District, Washington. Comptroller, Deputy Comptroller, Lieutenant Commander William Budovic, United States Coast Guard Surface Forces Logistics Center. You guys got a clean sweep here, eh? Commander Budovic arguably leads the most complex comptroller position within the Coast Guard due to the sheer volume of managing $650 million in operating expenses, 3 supply funds, an industrial fund, and a Coast Guard's yard working capital fund. Managing over 162 employees, including military, civilian, and contractors, his daily actions directly impact the Surface Forces Logistics Center ability to maintain the Coast Guard's aging fleet. His leadership directly contributed to the Coast Guard's clean audit opinion in FY 2013 and 2014. Acquisition cost analysis, Monty Holcomb, United States Coast Guard Personnel Allowance and Staffing Division. Mr. Holcomb demonstrated exceptional leadership, stewardship, accountability as the military pay account team leader through 2004. His pinpoint financial modeling was crucial in allowing the maximum number of accessions to occur within budgetary constraints while minimizing impacts to key discretionary pay programs. His diligent work throughout the year reflect great credit upon him, strengthening the fiscal stewardship of the Coast Guard and increased the Coast Guard's ability to serve the American people. First, Large Team Award, Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army Financial Management and Comptroller, who are Army Budget Office, Revolving Funds Division, Supply Management Team. Led by Mr. Stephen Allenbach and accompanied by the Supply Management Team. The Supply Management Team aggressively reviewed and analyzed spare prices, resulting in customer price reductions of over $300 million. Woo, this improves operational maintenance, buying power, provides flexibility to Army, and puts the resources in the right place to support Army missions. The team efforts ensures Army training and operational priorities and continues to be a great credit upon all of you. Now, I got to mention one thing before I stop. Stephen Allenbeck, he and I had, well, we go way back, and we had a great conversation. I owed you this call out because we inadvertently left him off the program because it was truncated. So he gave me some high fives in the back, and he said, just mention me, but he's going to represent the team. And I'm hoping his name is on a board, right? Correct. So you guys have done great. You represent yourselves, the Army Budget Office, the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Financial Management and Comptroller. Give him a hand, ladies and gentlemen. And last but not least, the Small Team Award. Headquarters, Department of Air Force Base Realignment and Closure Team. Representing the small team will be Ms. Vivian Johnson and Ms. Helen Griffith, accompanied by the BRAC team members. And I also want to congratulate, Colonel Griffin? Graham. She was just promoted a couple days ago, so congratulations to her and her team. The BRAC team developed and executed a plan of action to implement the 2013 National Defense Authorization Act mandate for transferring BRAC accounts to newly established Air Force base closure accounts. The Air Force had about $120 million of prior year funds that were in jeopardy of expiring if the, funds weren't transferred properly. Well, of course, they were successful. They were able to use those funds for current Air Force environmental cleanup requirements, and the team's collective actions reflects great credit upon themselves and the United States Air Force, and congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the 2014 awards. Please stand by for instructions because we're getting ready to break for the breakout sessions, correct? Thank you.
The long-awaited moment. We need a break, I know. One moment, please. Let me just fill you in if I can. Please bring your belongings with you, okay, because we will not be coming back after the break here. Grab a refill of coffee and food. Proceed down to where the service FM updates are. If you can make it, we'd appreciate if you could use the facilities down by the amphitheater. We're facility challenged in this area. Okay, so I want to try and make people aware of that. Please plan to attend your service affiliation breakout. For Navy and Marine Corps, you can pick either room to sit in. They would like to intersperse the groups there. Coast Guard is welcome to join the Fourth Estate. Corporate may choose as space permits. And we will need your cooperation to be in the lunchroom no later than noon because our speaker must speak before we serve lunch. So thank you and enjoy your Service FM updates. We'll see you later. He's got to speak, yeah. He's got to be out of there at 12:40. Yeah. Huh? He's got to be on the hill.